All right, you guys sent us a bunch of stuff about the Great Molasses Flood of 1919.
The Boston Molasses Flood.
Boston Molasses Flood. It doesn't sound that exciting when you first hear about it, but trust me, you're in for a wild ride with this one.
It might sound like a joke, a punchline, but this disaster goes way deeper than just sticky streets.
So before we dive into all the sticky details, let's set the scene. We've got this massive tank of molasses.
Yeah.
How massive are we talking here?
50 feet tall, 90 feet across.
Wow.
Holding a mind-boggling 2.3 million gallons of molasses.
Okay, to put that in perspective for me, how many Olympic-sized swimming pools is that?
To put that in perspective, that's enough to fill over 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Jeez.
And this wasn't just any syrup you drizzle on pancakes.
That's what I was about to ask.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't molasses pretty thick?
It's incredibly viscous.
Okay.
Almost like liquid tar.
Oh, wow.
Now imagine millions of gallons of that suddenly breaking loose.
Oh.
It wasn't just a spill.
Wow.
It was a wave of molasses, 25 feet high, barreling through the streets at 35 miles per hour.
But a wave of molasses?
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to see why this is deep dive worthy.
Right.
What caused this thing to explode in the first place?
So it was a recipe for disaster, really.
Okay.
Multiple factors converged on that fateful January day.
Okay.
First, the tank itself was shoddily constructed.
Oh, no.
They skimped on the steel, used faulty rivets, and apparently did minimal testing.
Really?
It's almost like they were just crossing their fingers and hoping for the best.
So they just built this giant, kind of poorly built tank and filled it up and called it a day?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's insane.
I mean, it's kind of wild when you think about it.
Were there any warning signs at all?
Oh, there were warning signs.
Like what?
The tank would groan every time it was filled, almost like it was crying out in pain.
Really?
But those warnings were ignored.
Oh, wow.
Then you have the molasses itself, which was fermenting inside the tank.
Fermenting?
Yeah.
How does that play into all of this?
So molasses naturally ferments, and that produces carbon dioxide gas.
Okay.
This gas builds up, adding pressure inside the tank.
Okay.
And on that particular day, the temperature spiked after a cold snap, causing the molasses to expand rapidly.
Oh, wow.
It was like a pressure cooker ready to blow.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
So you got this, poorly constructed tank filled with fermenting, expanding molasses under immense pressure.
Right. And then what?
So imagine you're walking down Commercial Street, grabbing a quick lunch, when suddenly the ground shakes violently.
Oh, wow.
You hear this deafening roar, a metallic screech like something tearing through steel.
Wow.
Rivets shoot out of the tank like bullets, and then this monstrous wave of molasses comes surging towards you.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be there.
This wave of molasses,
Yeah.
what kind of damage are we talking about here?
This is a force of nature, pure and simple.
Buildings were ripped from their foundations, completely pulverized.
It is.
There was a streetcar nearby, knocked clean off its tracks.
Wow.
Picture this wall of molasses,
Oh,
25 feet high, crashing into everything in its path.
And we can't forget the human cost of this disaster.
Absolutely.
21 people were killed, 150 were injured.
It's a horrifying number.
But numbers can never truly convey the horror of that day.
Yeah.
Real people with families, hopes and dreams were lost in an instant.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was one story in particular that stuck out to me.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony DeStasio, a young boy who was swept away by the wave.
It's just unimaginable.
Yeah.
The accounts describe him being tossed about on that wave of molasses, almost like he was surfing.
Oh.
Until he was thrown to the ground and completely engulfed.
Jeez.
He was covered in so much molasses that he couldn't even call out for his mother.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is.
And the aftermath must have been just as horrifying, right?
Oh, yeah.
People trapped in this cooling, thickening goo.
It would have been like quicksand, only more relentless.
Wow.
The rescue efforts were hampered by the sheer volume and stickiness of the molasses.
Oh, wow.
First responders were wading through waist-deep molasses,
Jeez.
desperately trying to pull people out.
Oh, man.
Every movement was a struggle against this clinging, viscous mass.
It's amazing that anyone survived at all.
It really is.
Were there any, stories of heroism amidst all the chaos?
Yeah, there were many people that showed incredible courage that day. The cadets from the USS Nantucket, a training ship docked nearby,
Okay.
rushed to the scene without hesitation.
Okay.
They jumped into the molasses, risking their own lives to save others.
They jumped right into the molasses.
Yeah, they jumped right in.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
I can only imagine the scene that they encountered, just the chaos.
It was utter pandemonium.
Yeah.
People were screaming, buildings were collapsing, and the air was thick with the cloying smell of molasses.
Oh, man.
But these young cadets worked tirelessly, alongside the police,
No.
the Red Cross, and other volunteers, to pull survivors from the wreckage and tend to the injured.
So how long did it take to clean up this mess?
Weeks.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people were involved in the Herculean effort to remove the molasses.
Wow.
They used salt water from fireboats to try to wash it away,
Okay.
and tons of sand to absorb it. But even with all that, the harbor remained brown with molasses well into the summer.
Wow, I can't imagine the smell that lingered in the air.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
For decades after the flood, people in Boston's North End said they could still smell a faint hint of molasses on hot summer days.
Wow.
It became a haunting reminder of the tragedy.
That's incredible. This event really became ingrained in the city's memory.
It really did.
But beyond the human cost and the physical damage, this disaster also had a major impact on, like, industrial safety, didn't it?
Absolutely.
This was a wake-up call, right? A stark reminder that cutting corners and prioritizing profit over safety can have deadly consequences.
Definitely.
The investigation that followed revealed a shocking disregard for safety on the part of the company that owned the tank.
What?
So what happened to the company?
Yeah.
Did anyone face consequences for this negligence?
This is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
The victims and the families of those who died weren't about to let the company get away with this.
Right.
They filed a class action lawsuit
Okay.
demanding accountability and justice.
I imagine that must have been a landmark case.
It was.
What were the arguments presented in court?
So it was a long, drawn-out legal battle.
Yeah.
And get this.
Yeah.
The company actually tried to blame the explosion on anarchists.
Blaming anarchists.
Yeah, they claimed the tank had been sabotaged.
That sounds like a pretty desperate attempt to deflect responsibility.
It does, doesn't it?
Did anyone actually buy that argument?
It seems outlandish, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, no. A court-appointed auditor, an independent expert assigned to investigate the case, saw through their charade.
Okay, so this auditor's job was to, like, sift through the evidence?
Yes, sift through the evidence, examine the wreckage,
Okay.
and determine the true cause of the explosion.
Okay.
After 3 years of hearings and investigations,
Jeez.
the company was found responsible for the disaster.
It's good to hear that at least some justice was served.
It is.
So what happened to the company?
They were ordered to pay over $600,000 in damages.
Wow.
A huge sum of money at the time.
Yeah.
But beyond the financial penalties, this disaster had a lasting impact on industrial practices.
Okay.
The Great Molasses Flood forced a reckoning.
So it wasn't just about holding one company accountable. It led to real, tangible changes.
Absolutely.
What kind of impact are we talking about?
This tragedy was a catalyst for much-needed reform.
Oh.
It led to stricter building codes, especially for large storage tanks, and a greater emphasis on public safety.
So can you give some specific examples of the changes that resulted from this disaster?
Absolutely. One of the most significant changes was the requirement for rigorous stress testing for large tanks.
Okay.
Before the flood, there were no real standards for how these tanks were built or tested.
Really?
They were basically ticking time bombs,
Wow.
as we saw in Boston. But after the disaster, cities started implementing building codes that required engineers to calculate the stress loads on these tanks, taking into account factors like the weight of the contents, the materials used in construction, and even the potential for extreme weather conditions.
So no more just, like, winging it and hoping for the best.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it wasn't just about the initial construction.
Right.
The molasses flood also highlighted the need for regular inspections by independent engineers.
Okay.
These inspections would ensure that tanks were maintained properly and that any potential problems were identified and addressed before they could lead to another disaster.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does.
It's like getting a regular checkup at the doctor, right?
Precisely.
It's better to catch problems early on than to wait for a major breakdown.
Absolutely.
And these changes weren't limited to Boston, right?
No, not at all.
The impact of the molasses flood kind of rippled outwards, right?
It did.
Influencing building codes and safety regulations across the country.
It did. It was a tragic but necessary lesson.
Wow.
A turning point in how we think about industrial safety.
So this seemingly random event,
Yeah.
this tank of molasses exploding in Boston, ended up having a profound impact on how we build and regulate structures across the entire nation.
Absolutely.
That's pretty incredible.
It is. It's a powerful illustration of how even the most localized disasters can have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
Forcing us to confront systemic issues and rethink our approach to safety and accountability.
So what you're saying is we have the Great Molasses Flood to thank for some of the safety standards we take for granted today?
In a way, yes. This disaster forced people to acknowledge the human cost of negligence and the importance of prioritizing safety over profits.
Wow, it's interesting to think about how a single event can be such a catalyst for change.
It is, isn't it?
It's a reminder that progress often comes at a price.
It does.
And that it's our responsibility to learn from past mistakes and ensure that such tragedies are never repeated.
Definitely.
Well, this has been quite the eye-opener,
Yeah.
I have to admit. When we started this deep dive, I thought we were just going to be talking about a sticky mess in Boston.
Right.
But this goes so much deeper than that.
It does. It goes way deeper.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of history, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even the most seemingly mundane or even bizarre events can reveal profound truths about human nature, the consequences of our actions,
Yeah.
and our capacity for both incredible innovation and devastating negligence.
You've given us a lot to think about here.
Yeah.
We've covered the scale of the tank, the explosion itself, the horrifying aftermath, and the lasting impact this disaster had on industrial safety standards.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to unpack,
There is. There really is.
including the personal stories
Yeah.
of those affected by the flood, the intricacies of the class action lawsuit,
Right.
and the broader societal implications of this event.
Absolutely.
Sounds like we have a lot more ground to cover in this deep dive.
We do indeed. Get ready to dive even deeper into the sticky, fascinating, and ultimately thought-provoking story of the Great Molasses Flood.
I'm ready.
Sure.
So we talked about the tank, the explosion, the aftermath,
Right.
but I'm curious, what was the overall response like? How did the city of Boston
Yeah.
and the nation as a whole react to this disaster?
The initial reaction was understandably shock and disbelief. I mean,
Yeah.
a wave of molasses. It sounds
Yeah.
almost comical.
Right.
But the reality was anything but funny.
Yeah.
Newspapers across the country ran headlines about the Great Molasses Flood,
Wow.
with some even calling it the Boston Molasses Disaster.
I can imagine the sensationalism surrounding the event.
Yeah.
Did the coverage go beyond just reporting the facts?
Absolutely. Newspapers at the time loved a good story,
Yeah.
and the Great Molasses Flood was a story that practically wrote itself.
Right.
They ran vivid accounts of the chaos and destruction, often embellishing the details to make the event seem even more dramatic.
So a bit of fake news even back then.
Well, let's just say that journalistic standards were a bit different in the early 20th century.
Right.
The focus was often on selling papers rather than sticking to the strict facts.
Yeah.
But amidst the sensationalism,
Yeah.
there were also genuine attempts to understand what had happened and why.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It must have been a major story, even beyond just the initial shock and awe.
Oh, it was. It was a national conversation starter.
Wow.
For sure, people were fascinated by the sheer strangeness of the event,
Right.
but they were also grappling with the deeper implications.
What kind of implications are we talking about here?
This disaster raised questions about industrial safety,
Okay.
corporate responsibility,
Yeah.
and the role of government regulation.
Okay.
It sparked debates about the balance between progress and public safety,
Okay.
and it forced people to confront the potential consequences of unchecked industrial growth.
So it sounds like this event really resonated with people on a deeper level.
It did.
It wasn't just about the spectacle of a molasses flood.
Right.
It was about these larger societal issues.
Exactly. And it wasn't just confined to, intellectual circles or political debates.
Right.
The Great Molasses Flood also had a profound impact on the people of Boston,
Okay.
particularly those living in the North End.
Can you talk a bit about the North End
Got it.
and how this disaster affected the community?
The North End in 1919 was a bustling working-class neighborhood,
Okay.
home to many immigrants.
Okay.
It was a vibrant community,
Yeah.
full of life and energy. But the molasses flood left a deep scar, both physically and emotionally.
We've talked about, the lingering smell of molasses.
Right.
But what other lasting impacts did this event have on the North End?
Beyond the physical damage and the lingering smell, there was a sense of trauma,
Okay.
a collective grief that hung over the neighborhood.
Right.
People had lost loved ones,
Yeah.
homes, and
Of
businesses.
course.
The streets where children once played were now stained with the dark, sticky residue of the disaster.
I imagine that sense of loss must have been overwhelming.
It was. But even in the face of tragedy, the people of the North End showed incredible resilience.
Okay.
They came together to support one another,
Okay.
rebuilding their lives and their community.
This community support aspect is really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you give us some specific examples of how the people of the North End
Oh, yeah.
kind of helped each other in the aftermath of the flood?
Absolutely. Neighbors helped neighbors clean up the debris,
Okay.
shared what little food and supplies they had, and offered comfort to those who had lost loved ones.
Oh, yeah.
There were countless stories of everyday heroism, people risking their own safety to pull others from the wreckage,
Ah.
doctors and nurses working tirelessly to treat the injured,
Wow.
and community leaders organizing relief efforts.
It's amazing how people can find strength and compassion in the face of such adversity.
It is. It's a testament to the human spirit.
Yeah.
And this spirit of resilience and community was essential in the long and difficult process of rebuilding the North End.
So it sounds like this event had a profound impact on the North End,
It did.
shaping its identity and strengthening its sense of community.
It did. The Great Molasses Flood became a defining moment in the neighborhood's history.
Right.
A shared experience that brought people together
Yeah.
and forged an even deeper sense of belonging.
And this shared experience, this collective memory of the disaster,
Yeah.
likely played a role in the legal battle against the company, right?
Absolutely. The people of the North End weren't just going to accept this as some, freak accident.
Yeah.
They knew that negligence had played a role,
Right.
and they were determined to hold the company accountable.
Yeah.
This shared sense of outrage fueled the class action lawsuit, giving it momentum and a powerful moral force.
So this wasn't just a legal battle.
Right.
It was a community fighting for justice.
Precisely.
Right,
And it
yeah.
wasn't just about financial compensation.
Right.
It was about sending a message,
Yeah.
making sure that such a tragedy would never happen again.
It's incredible how this event mobilized an entire community to demand accountability and change.
Yeah, it is.
Can we dive a bit deeper into the class action lawsuit?
Sure.
You mentioned that the company tried to blame anarchists.
They did.
Can you elaborate on that?
It was a truly outlandish claim.
Yeah.
The company, desperate to avoid responsibility,
Yeah.
tried to pin the blame on anarchists,
Okay.
claiming they had sabotaged the tank.
Wow.
They even went so far as to plant rumors and spread misinformation in an attempt to sway public opinion.
That's wild. It
Yeah.
sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It does, doesn't it?
But why anarchists? Was
Yeah.
there any, evidence to support that claim?
None whatsoever.
Wow.
It was a complete fabrication, a cynical attempt to deflect blame and avoid the financial and legal consequences of their own negligence.
So how did the victims and their lawyers,
Yeah.
counter this absurd claim?
They presented a mountain of evidence demonstrating the company's culpability.
Okay.
They brought in engineers and construction experts
Okay.
who testified about the shoddy construction of the tank,
Right.
the faulty rivets,
Yeah.
the lack of proper testing,
Right.
and the company's blatant disregard for safety warnings.
So it sounds like a classic, David versus Goliath story.
It does, doesn't it?
The community fighting against this powerful corporation that
Yeah.
was trying to, cover up its wrongdoing.
Exactly.
And thankfully, David prevailed in this case.
They did.
The court-appointed auditor, after a thorough investigation, concluded that the explosion was a direct result of the company's negligence,
They did, yeah.
not some anarchist plot.
Right.
That must have been a huge victory for the victims
It was.
and the community as a whole.
A huge victory.
It's inspiring to see ordinary people standing up to corporate greed
It is.
and demanding justice.
It is.
But I'm curious, what exactly did this court-appointed auditor do?
Yeah.
It sounds like a very important role.
It is a crucial role in complex cases like this.
Okay.
The court-appointed auditor is an independent expert,
Okay.
usually with a background in engineering or a related field,
Okay.
who is tasked with investigating the facts of the case
Right.
and providing an impartial assessment.
So they're like a neutral third party.
Right.
They're there to
Yeah.
cut through the noise and get to the truth of what happened.
Exactly. They examine the physical evidence,
Okay.
review documents,
Okay.
interview witnesses,
Yeah.
and consult with experts to piece together a complete picture of the event. Their job is to present the court with an unbiased analysis
Right.
of the cause of the disaster
Yeah.
and who, if anyone, is responsible.
And in this case,
Yeah.
the auditor clearly saw through the company's lies
They did.
and determined that they were to blame.
Right.
Precisely. The auditor's report was damning,
It was.
detailing the company's numerous failings
Yeah.
and their blatant disregard for safety.
It was a key piece of evidence that helped sway the court in favor of the victims.
So this auditor played a crucial role in ensuring that justice was served.
Absolutely. The court-appointed auditor is a vital safeguard in our legal system,
Right.
ensuring that even powerful corporations can be held accountable for their actions.
It's reassuring to know that such safeguards exist.
It is.
But going back to, like, the community response, what was the feeling like in the North End when the company was finally held responsible?
It was a moment of collective vindication.
Wow.
The community had fought long and hard for justice, and the court's decision affirmed their belief that the company was to blame.
Yeah.
It was a victory not just for the victims and their families,
Yeah.
but for the entire North End.
This story is full of twists and turns.
It is.
From a wave of molasses to a company blaming anarchists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we're not done yet.
No, we're not.
This case had a lasting impact, not just on the North End,
Yeah.
but on the nation as a whole.
Absolutely.
So the repercussions of this event extended far beyond Boston.
They did. The Great Molasses Flood was a turning point in how we think about industrial safety and corporate accountability.
I'm eager to learn more about the broader impact of this event.
Well, then let's dive in.
Okay, so we've established that the Great Molasses Flood wasn't just some isolated incident.
Right.
It sparked, like, a national conversation
It did.
about industrial safety and corporate accountability.
Yeah.
How did that conversation translate into actual change?
Right.
Like, what lasting impact did this event have on, like, a broader scale?
This disaster was a wake-up call for the entire nation.
Okay.
It exposed the dangers of lax safety regulations
Right.
and the potential for catastrophic consequences when companies prioritize profits over people.
So it wasn't just about holding one company accountable.
Right.
It was about preventing similar disasters from happening in the future.
Exactly. The public outcry following the molasses flood created immense pressure for reform.
Okay.
People were demanding that companies be held responsible for ensuring the safety of their workers and the communities they operate in.
Did this pressure lead to any specific changes in, like, laws or regulations?
It did. The Great Molasses Flood served as a catalyst for a wave of new safety regulations and building codes across the country.
Okay.
Before the disaster, there was a patchwork of regulations, often inadequate and poorly enforced.
Wow.
But the public outcry forced lawmakers to take action.
What kind of regulations are we talking about?
One of the most significant changes was the introduction of stricter standards for the construction and inspection of large storage tanks.
All right.
States began implementing building codes that required companies to use higher quality materials,
Right.
adhere to rigorous engineering standards,
Okay.
and conduct regular inspections by independent experts.
So no more cutting corners or hoping for the best.
Precisely. These new regulations aim to ensure that tanks were built to withstand the stress of their contents,
Right.
the elements, and even potential accidents.
Okay.
They also required companies to have comprehensive safety plans in place
Right.
and to train their employees on proper handling procedures.
So it sounds like the focus shifted from, like, reacting to disasters to proactively preventing them.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
The Great Molasses Flood ushered in a new era of industrial safety,
Wow.
one that emphasized prevention, accountability, and a greater awareness of the potential risks associated with industrial processes.
Were these changes limited to the storage of molasses, or did they have, like, broader implications?
The impact went far beyond molasses. These stricter safety regulations extended to a wide range of industries,
Okay, like what?
from oil and gas to chemicals and manufacturing.
Wow.
The lessons learned from the molasses flood helped to shape safety standards for the storage and handling of all kinds of hazardous materials.
It's incredible to think that this one event,
It is.
as tragic as it was,
Yeah.
had such a widespread impact on industrial safety across the nation.
It's a testament to the power of collective action and the importance of learning from past mistakes.
But these changes weren't just about, like, regulations and building codes, right?
No, not at all.
Didn't this event also have a lasting impact on, like, how we think about corporate responsibility?
Absolutely. The Great Molasses Flood was a turning point in how we view the responsibility of corporations to ensure the safety of their workers,
Right.
the environment,
Yeah.
and the communities they operate in.
Okay.
It sparked a national conversation about corporate ethics and accountability,
Right.
forcing companies to reckon with the human cost of negligence.
Can you give us some specific examples of how this, like, shift in thinking manifested itself?
One notable example is the rise of consumer activism and shareholder advocacy.
Okay.
In the wake of the Molasses flood,
Yeah.
people became more aware of the power they held as consumers and investors.
Right.
They began demanding that companies adopt ethical practices,
Yeah.
prioritize safety,
Okay.
and be held accountable for their actions.
So it wasn't just about government regulation. It was
Yeah.
also about citizens demanding better from corporations.
Exactly. People realized that they had a voice
Yeah.
and that they could use their purchasing power and their investments to influence corporate behavior.
Wow.
This led to the growth of organizations dedicated to promoting corporate social responsibility and holding companies accountable for their environmental and social impact.
It's amazing how one event can trigger such a profound shift
It is.
in societal attitudes and expectations.
It's a reminder that even the most horrific tragedies can serve as catalysts for positive change. Yeah. The Great Molasses Flood, while a terrible disaster, ultimately helped to create a safer and more accountable industrial landscape.
It sounds like we owe a lot to the victims of the flood
We do.
and the community that fought so hard for justice.
Absolutely.
They didn't just seek compensation for their losses.
Right.
They helped to prevent future tragedies from occurring.
They did. And their legacy lives on in the stricter safety regulations, the heightened awareness of corporate responsibility,
Right.
and the ongoing efforts to ensure that industries prioritize the well-being of people and the planet.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've gone from a seemingly bizarre event,
Yeah.
a wave of molasses engulfing a Boston neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
to a profound exploration of industrial safety,
Yeah.
corporate accountability,
Yeah.
and the power of collective action.
It's amazing how something so strange and seemingly insignificant
Yeah,
can have such a lasting impact on society.
that's the beauty of history.
It is.
It's full of unexpected connections, surprising revelations,
Right.
and reminders that even the most seemingly insignificant events can have far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely.
We started this deep dive with a wave of molasses.
We did.
But we've ended up exploring a wave of change.
We have, and that wave continues to ripple outwards, shaping our world in ways we may not even fully realize.
So what can our listeners take away from all of this? Besides, of course, a newfound appreciation for the potential dangers of molasses.
I think the key takeaway is that we all have a role to play in creating a safer, more just, and sustainable world.
Okay.
We can demand better from the companies we support,
Right.
hold our leaders accountable,
Yeah.
and speak out against injustice.
Okay.
The Great Molasses Flood is a powerful reminder that even in the face of tragedy,
Yeah.
positive change is possible when people come together and demand better.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Great Molasses Flood.
We have.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
Yes.
There's a whole world of fascinating stories out there waiting to be uncovered.